Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you love dramatic romance stories filled with twists, power, and unforgettable love, you're in the right place. Today's story follows a CEO and a rising star whose lives collide in the middle of a public scandal. But what starts as chaos turns into something neither of them expected. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part. Now, let's get into part one of the story. Everyone knew Nova Blaze. The world knew her as the fearless black female rapper with platinum records, razor-sharp lyrics, and a mouth that could humble any interviewer brave enough to disrespect her. Raised in Baltimore's hottest blocks, Nova had turned pain into poetry and struggle into power. She wore diamonds, but never forgot the cracked sidewalks that made her. She was loud, bold, unapologetic, and she trusted no man, especially rich ones. Then there was Alexander Whitmore III, old money rich, generational wealth. CEO of Whitmore Holdings, a billion-dollar empire built on shipping, hotels, and investments older than most cities. He was tall, broad-shouldered, devastatingly handsome, with clean-cut charm and a calm smile that made people listen before he even spoke. But unlike the arrogant men people expected, Alexander was humble, kind, honest to a fault. He remembered janitors' names, sent flowers to grieving employees, and quietly paid strangers hospital bills without ever letting them know. He was the kind of man who opened doors because he respected women, not because he thought they needed him, and Nova hated how much that confused her. They met at a charity gala. Nova only attended because her manager said it would help her image. Alexander hosted because the charity funded housing programs in struggling neighborhoods. She arrived in a custom black gown with gold chains draped like armor. Heads turned. Cameras flashed. Whispers followed. Alexander saw her from across the room and smiled warmly. "You must be Nova Blaze." She crossed her arms. "And you must be one of the men born rich enough to think handshakes count as personality." Instead of getting offended, he laughed. A real laugh. "That was unfair," he said. "I also have excellent manners." She blinked, then smirked despite herself. That was the first crack in her walls. They should have never worked. Nova cursed. When she was happy, angry, excited, bored. Alexander said pardon and wrote thank you notes by hand. She blasted trap music in the car. He preferred jazz and old soul records. She challenged everything. Every opinion. Every tradition. Every sentence, if she felt like it. He had spent his life in boardrooms where people nodded at whatever he said. Nova was the first person to look him dead in the eye and say, "That idea is dumb." And he loved it. For the first time, someone saw the man, not the money. For the first time, someone admired Nova's mind more than her body or fame. He listened when she spoke about injustice. She listened when he explained patience and strategy. She taught him how to survive. He taught her how to rest. The gala ended long after midnight. Champagne glasses sat abandoned on silver trays. The orchestra had packed up. The city skyline shimmered beyond the tall windows like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Nova should have gone home hours ago. Instead, she sat barefoot on a private terrace with Alexander Whitmore, heels kicked. Off. One hand wrapped around a glass of bourbon. She wasn't drinking anymore. They had talked for hours about everything. Her childhood, his loneliness, music, power, family wounds, dreams they never admitted aloud. He listened in a way most people never had, fully, carefully, like every word mattered, and Nova found herself laughing more than she had in months. "You always this serious?" she asked, nudging his shoulder. "Only until someone interesting ruins it," she smirked. "So I ruined your night?" He looked at her with that calm, devastating gaze. "No," he said softly. "You made it unforgettable." The air shifted. The teasing disappeared. The distance between them suddenly felt impossible. Nova stood first, crossing to him. "You always say things like that?" "Only when I mean them." She kissed him before he could finish breathing. It wasn't soft. It wasn't polite. It was hunger, meeting restraint and tearing through it. Alexander caught her waist, steady and strong, kissing her back like he'd been trying not to all night. Every hour of tension broke at once. They stumbled inside laughing, breathless, hands finding each other with reckless urgency. Jackets hit the floor. Jewelry landed somewhere near the couch. By dawn, they were tangled in expensive sheets, exhausted and smiling like fools. Nova traced the line of his jaw. You move fast for a CEO. Alexander kissed her palm. You make me forget schedules. What was supposed to be one night became breakfast. Breakfast became lunch. Lunch became a weekend. A weekend became weeks of late-night drives, secret dinners, rooftop kisses, stolen mornings, and a love that arrived like a storm neither of them could stop. Then the tabloids found them. At first it was gossip. Rapper caught leaving billionaire's penthouse, then came cruelty. Street queen plays rich man's fantasy. Whitmore heir embarrasses family with public fling paparazzi, followed Nova everywhere. Men online dissected her body, her past, her worth. Commentators called her too loud, too rough, too ambitious, too black, too much. Alexander was branded weak, manipulated, reckless. His family said nothing publicly, but privately, they said, enough. At a formal dinner, his uncle called her temporary excitement. Alexander nearly threw him out himself. But Nova heard it, and something inside her cracked. The next morning, while Alexander was in a board meeting, Nova packed everything she'd brought. No dramatic note, no tears on paper, just silence. She left, the penthouse key on the marble counter, and walked out before anyone could stop her. By sunset, she was at her best friend Tasha's apartment across town. Small space, loud radiator, real life, the kind of place where nobody cared about stock prices or bloodlines. Tasha opened the door, saw the bags, and stepped aside. You running or healing? She asked. Nova rolled her eyes. Can I sit down before you become a therapist? Hours later, she sat on the couch in an oversized tee, staring at the city through cheap blinds. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Alexander calling again. She let it ring out every time. You love him, Tasha said from the kitchen. Nova scoffed. Love don't erase disrespect. He disrespect you? No. Then who did? Nova stayed quiet. That was the problem. Alexander had loved her openly, protected her fiercely. Never once made her feel small, but the world around him had, and instead of fighting beside him, she disappeared. She hugged her knees tighter. Had she left because she was protecting herself, or because being loved that deeply scared her more than being alone ever had? Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. I understand if you need space, but please don't mistake other people's cruelty for my heart. She stared at the words until they blurred. Then another message came. I'm still here. Nova closed her eyes. For the first time in years, the strongest woman in every room didn't know whether walking away had been strength or fear. 3 days after Nova left, the media frenzy had only grown worse. News vans parked outside Whitmore Holdings. Gossip blogs ran hourly updates. Talking heads debated their relationship like it was a business merger instead of two human beings trying to love each other. Nova tried to ignore it from Tasha's apartment. She wore sweats, hair wrapped, face bare, curled on the couch with a mug of coffee gone cold. But every channel, every phone alert, every social feed found a way back to him. Then Tasha walked in holding the remote. Get up. I'm not in the mood. Too bad. She clicked on the television. Live coverage. Alexander Whitmore, holding an emergency press conference. Nova's heart stuttered. He stepped behind the podium in a navy suit, drew tight, eyes sharper than she had ever seen them. Cameras flashed non-stop. Reporters shouted questions over each other. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned toward the microphone. Before I discuss any business matters, he said calmly, I need to address something that should never have become public spectacle in the first place. The room went silent. My relationship is not a scandal. Nova sat up straighter. It is not a headline. It is not entertainment. And it is certainly not an invitation for anyone to disrespect the woman I care about. The reporters erupted with more questions. He raised one hand, and the room quieted again. Miss Nova, Blaze is intelligent, accomplished, generous, and stronger than many of the people criticizing her could ever hope to be. Nova's throat tightened. The language used about her in the media has been racist, sexist, cruel, and unacceptable. Tasha slowly lowered herself into the chair beside the couch. Alexander's voice never rose, but every word hit like thunder. You may discuss my companies. You may criticize my decisions. That comes with my position. He paused. But my private life belongs to me. and the woman in it deserves the same dignity and respect afforded to anyone else. Another reporter yelled, "Are you confirming the relationship is over?" For the first time, pain crossed his face. Small. Barely there. But Nova saw it. "I'm confirming," he said quietly, "that I care deeply for someone who owes the public nothing." Then he stepped away from the podium and walked out, ignoring every shouted question behind him. The apartment was silent, except for the muted television. Nova stared at the blank screen long after Tasha turned it off. "He did that for you," Tasha said softly. Nova swallowed hard. "He did that because he's decent." "No," Tasha replied. "He did that because he loves you." Nova's eyes filled before she could stop them. She wiped at them angrily. "I left because I was tired of being judged." Tasha nodded. "I know." "I left because his world was tearing me apart." "I know." Nova's voice cracked. "I left because I didn't know how to stay." Tasha leaned forward. "Baby, that ain't the same thing." Nova looked down at her hands. All her life, leaving first had been survival. Leave before they betray you. Leave before they embarrass you. Leave before they decide you aren't enough. But Alexander never made her feel like she had to run. She had done that all on her own. "You know how many people go their whole lives without being loved, right?" Tasha asked gently. "Like truly loved, seen, protected, chosen." Nova said nothing. "You found a man who ain't scared of your fire, who respects you, stands up for you, and doesn't ask you to be smaller, so he can feel bigger." Tasha shook her head. "And you really think that comes around every day?" A tear slid down Nova's cheek. "No," she whispered. Her friend reached over and squeezed her hand, then stopped calling it strength when it's fear. Nova closed her eyes, because deep down, she already knew the truth. She hadn't left because the world was too hard. She left because loving him mattered enough to hurt. And now, she had to decide if she was brave enough to go back. Nova barely remembered grabbing her coat. One second, she was crying on Tasha's couch. The next, she was halfway out the door while Tasha yelled after her, "Fix your face first! You look like regret!" Nova laughed through tears and kept moving. Whitmore Holdings towered over downtown, like polished steel and old power. By the time she arrived, cameras still crowded the sidewalk from the press conference. Reporters turned the second they recognized her. Flashes exploded. Questions flew. "Nova, are you back together? Did he know you were coming? Were you the reason for the statement?" She kept walking. Head high. No answers. Inside, security froze when they saw her. "I need to see Alexander." The guard blinked. "Ms. Blaze, he's in a board meeting." "Then tell the board to survive without him for 5 minutes. A few employees tried not to smile. Minutes later, she was in the private elevator, heart pounding so hard it felt violent. What if he was angry? What if she'd hurt him too badly? What if she was too late? The doors opened to the executive floor. His assistant stood up so fast she nearly dropped her tablet. "Miss Blaze." Nova was already moving. She pushed open the conference room doors. A dozen executives looked up in shock. Charts glowed on screens. Silence hit like a wall. At the head of the table sat Alexander. He stood instantly. Their eyes locked. Everything else disappeared. Nova looked around the room. "Y'all mind?" No one moved. Alexander never took his eyes off her. "Leave us." The board scattered so fast chairs nearly tipped over. Doors shut behind them. Then it was just the two of them. The room suddenly felt too quiet, too large, too full of everything unsaid. Nova swallowed. "I saw the press conference." He nodded once. "You shouldn't have had to do that." "I wanted to." She looked down, then back at him. "I left wrong." Pain flickered across his face. "You left." "I know." Her voice broke. "And I'm sorry." Alexander said nothing. Nova stepped closer. "I've spent my whole life leaving first. Before people could hurt me. Before they could choose somebody else. Before they could make me feel small." She wiped at tears angrily. "But you never did any of that." His jaw tightened. "You loved me, right?" she whispered. "And I got scared. For the first time since she entered, his expression softened. Nova. No, let me finish. She pointed at him with trembling fingers. You get one dramatic apology speech from me, so let me land this plane. A laugh escaped him despite himself. That sound gave her courage. I love you. The words hung between them. Raw. Real. I love you, Alexander. I love your kind heart, your annoying patience, the way you overtip everybody, the way you listen. When I rant, the way you protect people like it's breathing. Tears spilled freely now. And I don't want to run anymore. He crossed the room in 3 strides. Before she could inhale, his hands framed her face and his mouth was on hers. The kiss was desperate, relieved, aching. Days of hurt and longing poured into it. Nova clutched his jacket, kissing him back like she meant to make up for every missed second. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Don't do that again, he murmured. Leave. Disappear. She nodded. Okay. He kissed her once more, softer this time. You scared me. Her eyes filled again. I scared myself. Alexander wrapped his arms around her, pulling her tight against his chest. Then we'll learn together, he said quietly, how to stay. Nova laughed weakly into his shirt. You always got some poetic billionaire nonsense ready. Usually. She looked up at him. Board still outside? Probably. Good. A wicked grin spread across her face. Call them back in. He blinked. Why? She straightened her coat, wiped her tears, and grabbed his hand. Because if they go and gossip, let's give them something accurate. When the board members re-entered, they found their CEO seated calmly at the table. Nova sat sideways in his lap like she belonged there, which, finally, she did. The boardroom stayed frozen for a full 5 seconds. Executives who negotiated billion-dollar mergers for a living suddenly found staring at their CEO with Nova Blaze in his lap far more intimidating than any market crash. Nova leaned back against Alexander, like she had signed the lease there. What? She asked, arching a brow. Meeting cancelled because you all look stressed. A few people coughed to hide laughter. Alexander, somehow still composed, adjusted the papers in front of him. As I was saying before the interruption, he said calmly, one arm secure around Nova's waist, we'll be restructuring the acquisition timeline. Nova turned to him. He was talking business this whole time. I am now. She grinned, cold. The tension in the room broke. Even the oldest board members smiled despite themselves. For the first time since the scandal began, Alexander looked truly at peace. That evening, they returned to his penthouse together. No secret entrances, no hiding. Photographers caught them hand in hand, Nova laughing while Alexander opened the car door for her. By morning, every paper in the country had the photo. CEO and rap star reunited after public defense love wins in Whitmore romance Nova. Blaze returns and looks unbothered. She framed that last headline out of spite. Inside the penthouse, everything felt the same and completely different. Her heels still sat near the couch where she'd kicked them off nights ago. One earring still rested under a side table. Her silk scarf was folded neatly on a chair. Alexander had kept it there untouched. Nova noticed immediately. You ain't moved none of my stuff? He loosened his tie. I was hoping you'd come back for it. Her chest tightened. You sentimental as hell. I'm selective about it. She crossed the room slowly. And if I hadn't come back? Alexander looked at her honestly. I would have respected your choice. He stepped closer and hated every minute of it. Nova exhaled shakily. Why you always know the exact thing to say? Because with you, he said softly, I never want to waste words. She kissed him before he could say anything else. Long, slow, full of relief. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against his chest. I'm scared sometimes, she admitted quietly. He wrapped his arms around her. So am I. She looked up in surprise. You. Losing you terrified me. Nova's expression softened. You. Rich, handsome, successful, and sweet. You mean to tell me you scared? Constantly, he said dryly. Especially when you're angry. She laughed, the sound warm and free. The next weeks weren't perfect. There were awkward family dinners, media nonsense, online fools. With opinions nobody asked for. But this time, they faced it together. When a reporter asked Nova if she felt intimidated dating such a powerful man, she smiled into the camera. Baby, the only intimidated person in this relationship is him when I'm hungry. When Alexander was asked how he handled Nova's strong personality, he replied, I don't handle it. I admire it. The clip went viral. One night, months later, Nova stood on the penthouse balcony overlooking the city. Alexander came behind her, draping a coat over her shoulders before wrapping his arms around her waist. You cold? He asked. No. Then why are you shivering? She leaned back into him. Because I ain't used to being this happy. He turned her gently to face him. You could get used to it. Nova narrowed her eyes. That a promise? He reached into his coat pocket. No, he said, dropping to one knee. It's a proposal. Nova stared at him, then at the ring, then back at him. Alexander. The diamond was elegant, timeless, set in a slim platinum band that somehow managed to look both expensive and deeply personal. Very him. He looked up at her with none of the polished confidence he wore in boardrooms, only vulnerability. I know our story has not been conventional, he said softly. We met fast, fell hard, broke painfully, and found our way back. Nova's eyes were already wet, but every version of my future that feels right has you in it. He took a slow breath. You challenge me, ground me, inspire me. You've made my life louder, warmer, braver, and more honest. She pressed a hand over her mouth. I don't need perfection with you, he continued. I just want the privilege of choosing you every day for the rest of my life. The city lights shimmered behind them. Nova Blaze, he said, smiling faintly. Will you marry me? She stood there in stunned silence so long he finally blinked. Should I be concerned? He asked carefully. Nova burst into tears, then laughter, then more tears. You really proposed in a three-piece suit on a balcony like some billionaire romance movie. I can redo it casually if necessary. She dropped to her knees in front of him, grabbed his face with both hands, and kissed him hard enough to nearly knock him backward. When she pulled away, she was grinning through tears. Yes. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. Yes? Yes, fool, she laughed. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly. Nova held it up to the light. Oh, this is disrespectfully beautiful. Alexander laughed, then stood and pulled her into his arms. She wrapped herself around him like she belonged there, because she did. The wedding announcement broke the internet by morning. Whitmore CEO engaged a rap icon Nova Blaze from scandal to soulmates power. Couple says yes. His family had mixed reactions. Some remained cold, some quietly softened. His mother requested a private lunch with Nova. Nova accepted. She wore designer heels, flawless makeup, and enough confidence to power the city grid. When his mother stiffly said, You do seem to make my son happy, Nova smiled. And you seem to be trying. Growth looks good on you. Alexander nearly choked on his water. Wedding planning became chaos. Nova wanted live music, soul food, and dancing until sunrise. Alexander wanted elegance, intimacy, and no press. They compromised beautifully. A private estate ceremony with candlelight and strings, followed by a reception where Nova's DJ had elderly socialites twerking by midnight. Tasha cried louder than everyone. Alexander cried first again. Nova never let him live it down. When she walked down the aisle, he forgot every speech he'd prepared. She was radiant, strong, soft, untouchable, and entirely his. At the altar, he took her hands. You look speechless, she whispered. I am. Good. My turn to talk then. The guests laughed. Their vows were imperfect, heartfelt, and real. He promised steadiness, honesty, and devotion. She promised loyalty, passion, and to only embarrass him publicly when necessary. When the officiant told him to kiss his bride, Alexander did not hesitate. The applause was thunderous. Later that night, long after the guests had gone, Nova kicked off her shoes and stood barefoot with him under the stars. "Mrs. Whitmore sounds weird," she said. "Then don't use it," she smiled. "Good, because Nova Blaze Whitmore sounds legendary." He kissed her temple. "Whatever name you choose," he murmured, "you'll always be the greatest thing that ever happened to me." She looked up at him, eyes soft. "Damn," she said quietly. "I really married the perfect man." Alexander smiled. "No," he said. "You married the right one." 3 days before his parole hearing, Darnell D. Block Graves sat in the prison common room, watching afternoon television with half interest and a permanent scowl. He was broad, hard-faced, tattooed from neck to wrist, the kind of man who carried violence like a second skin. Even inside, people gave him space. Years earlier, he'd ruled corners, clubs, and every room he entered through fear. And years earlier, he had dated Nova, if possession could be mistaken for love. Back then, he called her his girl, like she was property. Hated when producers looked at her too long. Hated when fans praised her without mentioning him. Hated when she grew bigger than the box he built for her. When she finally left, he swore she'd come back. Women always did, in his mind. Then he caught a weapons charge that turned into years behind bars. And in every bitter season of confinement, one thought stayed with him. Nova would wait. Maybe angry, maybe rich now, maybe louder than ever. But his. The TV anchor smiled brightly. Entertainment news. Rap superstar Nova Blaze has married billionaire CEO Alexander Whitmore in a private ceremony this weekend. The screen flashed wedding photos. Nova, radiant in white. Alexander, holding her hand like it was something sacred. Kissing her forehead. Smiling at her like the room didn't matter. The room around Darnell disappeared. His jaw clenched so hard, it ached. Someone nearby whistled. "Yo, ain't that your ex?" Another inmate laughed. "Looked like she upgraded, bro." The plastic chair hit the floor when Darnell stood so fast it flipped backward. No one laughed after that. He stared at the screen as another photo appeared, Alexander's hand resting at Nova's waist, protective and familiar, touching her, claiming her. Darnell's hands curled into fists. "That ain't his," he muttered. The anchor continued, talking, but he heard nothing else. In his mind, Nova still belonged to the unfinished business of his life, a chapter he never consented to closing. He had imagined stepping out free, showing up in her world again, reminding her where she came from, reminding everyone who she used to be with. Now some polished rich man was wearing the life Darnell thought had been paused for him. A guard barked for calm when he slammed his fist into the cinder block wall. Blood marked the concrete. He didn't notice. That night in his cell, he lay awake staring at the ceiling. Parole in 3 days, freedom in reach, and rage crawling under his skin like fire ants. He replayed memories of Nova, laughing in cheap apartments before fame, riding beside him in stolen cars, arguing with him with that same mouth she still had. He never remembered the fear he caused, never the nights she cried, never the bruises on walls from his temper, only the version where she was his and should have stayed that way. By dawn, he had built himself a purpose. He would get out. He would find her. He would let that CEO know money didn't buy everything, and he would remind Nova that some people never let go. Across the city, in a penthouse full of sunlight, Nova slept peacefully against Alexander's chest, wedding ring glinting on her hand. For the first time in years, she felt safe enough to sleep deeply. Neither of them knew a ghost from her past, had just learned her new name. Morning light spilled across the penthouse in soft gold. Nova woke first, wrapped in expensive sheets, and Alexander's arms, his breathing slow and steady against the back of her neck. For a moment, life felt almost suspiciously peaceful. Then her phone began vibrating across the nightstand like it had personal beef with her. She groaned. "Who calling this early, trying to ruin blessings?" Alexander's sleepy voice rumbled. Behind her. "Ignore them." Tempting. She reached for the phone anyway. It was Tasha. Nova answered on speaker. "If this ain't life or death, I'm blocking you." "It might be both," Tasha said immediately. Nova sat up. What happened? I got a call from Keisha. You remember Keisha? Her cousin works intake at the parole office. Nova's stomach tightened before Tasha even finished. Darnell got approved. The room went still. Alexander was fully awake now. He pushed himself up on one elbow, eyes on her face. 3 days became today. Administrative release. Nova said nothing. Tasha's voice softened. Girl, you there? Yeah. Nova's voice came out flat. I'm here. He asked if anybody had your current address. Alexander's expression hardened instantly. Tasha kept going. Nobody gave him nothing. But people talking. You know how it goes. Nova closed her eyes. Thanks for telling me. Call me later. The line ended. Alexander took the phone gently from her hand and set it aside. Who is Darnell? Nova laughed once, humorless. A mistake with muscles. She got out of bed and paced to the window. He's my ex. Before the music took off. Before I learned better. Alexander stayed quiet, letting her speak. He was controlling, jealous, mean when he wanted to be. She folded her arms tightly. I left him. Then he got locked up. A few months later. She stared out over the city. I thought prison ended that chapter. Alexander stood and crossed the room slowly. Did he hurt you? Nova hesitated. Not in ways people always look for. That answer said enough. Something cold settled behind Alexander's eyes, but his voice remained gentle. You don't have to deal with him alone. She turned sharply. I don't need saving. I know. He stepped closer. I'm offering support, not rescue. The tension in her shoulders loosened slightly. That was the difference. With him. He never confused protection with control. Nova sighed. He always thought I belonged to him. Alexander's jaw tightened. You belong to no one. She looked at him, emotions flickering across her face. Except maybe you. A little, she said softly. He smiled faintly, only by consent. That pulled the first real laugh from her all morning. By noon, tabloids had already found the story. Nova Blaze. Ex released days after wedding dangerous, past returns for power. Couple threat to Whitmore marriage. Alexander's PR team wanted statements. Lawyers wanted meetings. Security wanted schedules. Nova wanted silence. She sat in the kitchen, hoodie on, staring at untouched coffee. Alexander entered, carrying a folder. I've arranged additional security for the building, your studio, and any public appearances. Nova rolled her eyes. You work fast. I worry efficiently. He sat beside her. No one gets access to you without clearance. If he contacts you, it goes through legal counsel. If he approaches you, security handles it. She studied. Him. You really think he'd come after me? Alexander met her gaze steadily. I think men who mistake possession for love can be dangerous when reality corrects them. Nova looked down at her ring. For years she had survived by being harder than everyone around her. Louder, sharper, untouchable. But now there was something scarier than being hurt. Having something worth protecting. I hate that I'm scared, she admitted. Alexander reached for her hand. Being scared means you understand the stakes. He kissed her knuckles. It doesn't mean you're powerless. That evening, across town, Darnell stepped out of a correctional transport van carrying one duffel bag and a fury that had only matured with time. The city had changed. Billboards were newer, buildings taller, streets cleaner in places he remembered, dirty. But one image stayed burned in his mind. Nova in white. Another man's hand on her waist. He pulled a cheap phone from his pocket, powered it on, and smiled when old contacts still answered. Yeah, he said into the receiver. I'm home. He glanced toward the skyline where Whitmore Tower pierced the clouds. Tell me where's she at now. All right, that's it for today's story. But trust me, this is far from over. If you thought things were intense now, just wait until what happens next. Part 2 is where everything changes. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. And let me know in the comments, do you think their love can survive everything coming their way? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in part 2.